And of course, we have here naturally Trumbushka. Trump. He truly knows how to do the incredible. He knows how to do the unthinkable. And you can say anything you want about him and characterize him in any way. But the fact that he is the greatest master at creating worldwide commotion that is absolutely undeniable. And once again, he managed to create it in a way that no one else but him can. He even outdid himself, so to speak. And the resonance that arose as a result of the mineral deal. And Ginger Donny organized such a demonstrative weeding of the garden of world history and decisively uprooted all the weeds and non-standard crazy vegetables in this garden. In the process, without emphasizing it, but clearly indicating Trump removed both the USSR from the list of victors in World War II. Yes, the United States was declared the victor with the quote, "No one even came close in terms of bravery and military skill. We did more for victory in World War II than any other country. Incomparably more," said Trump. If we interpret his statement and understand it, it becomes clear that the Stalinist army is assigned a rather modest role as cannon fodder, which was armed by America, England, and the anti-Hitler coalition, and was supposed to distract part of Hitler's forces while the states dealt with the elite divisions of the Reich. And this distraction gave the United States the opportunity to complete work on nuclear weapons. From now on, this is the unequivocal official standpoint of the United States, which, at the instigation of the Americans, will become definitively textbook. But Russia, of course, responded with a froth of rage because Trump, in passing, barely brushing by, immediately toppled the main idol of the Putin regime. This idol is called Russian victory frenzy. But it will be very difficult for those who want to debate this because it is clear that the fate of the war was decided not by the outdated Katyushas and PPSHs, but by the Manhattan Project and nuclear weapons. That is, no matter the state of the fronts or the geographical position of the Hitlerite army, all these Berlins and non-Berlins, with the presence of nuclear weapons, the Reich would have been turned into a charred cutlet. And in 1945, the United States already had nuclear weapons. It must be said that Stalin officially acknowledged the inevitability of the complete defeat of the USSR without Lend-Lease and without Western weapons. But so far, surprisingly, the reactions to all this are very, very weak. In Russia, the reactions are fearful, demoralized, with everyone turning their heads towards the Kremlin, all waiting, what will Putin say? And only the most foolish rush to save the victory frenzy. But even these fools are moderating both their language and emotions. Well, for instance, the current successor of Zhirinovsky, Slutsky, is just ranting abstractly, like he's ready to educate Trump. And again, we won't allow anyone. So this whole eternal refrain of falsifying history is our great victory. But in general, Slutsky's words are worth no more than Slutsky's words. That is, it's something that can be disregarded. All the others, all the other official and semi-official figures either remain silent or bleat something, again trying to talk about the grand losses of the USSR and build an evidential base on these losses. The predominant role of the Soviet Union. Well, of course, some already unhinged patriots have filed a report against Trump with the Prosecutor General's Office of the Russian Federation. And probably Trump will be put on the wanted list by the Ministry of Internal Affairs, then sentenced in absentia for the rehabilitation of Nazism, denial of the leading role of the USSR, and so on, and so forth. It must be said that Trump chose a very opportune time right before this grandiose victory frenzy show on May 9th, which is also in question because the Kremlin doesn't know whether to believe in Zelensky's threats, these vague threats, or not. In any case, no one has ever hit Putin on the head with a crowbar with such force before. Biden, Obama, they didn't understand how sensitive the topic of victory frenzy is for a Russia that is not too confident in its own victory. After all, Russia had to shamefully hide the facts of its alliance with Hitler, disguise the occupation of Eastern Europe as so-called liberation, and create extensive mythology about various figures like Karbyshev and Zoya. And, well, this tiresome rhetoric about losses, which in reality says nothing at all. Losses are not an indicator of contribution to the war, but rather evidence of the incompetence of military leadership, the inability to plan operations effectively, and the ruthlessness towards their own soldiers, which we see even today in the example of the meat grinder assaults with their incredible losses by today's standards. Losses do not testify to anything else. Well, remember the Nevsky Pitachok, where simply put, this is a very, let's say, sad episode of the Second World War. Stalin's commanders enthusiastically but senselessly sacrificed 250,000 of their soldiers without any purpose, without any effect, without strategic or even tactical sense. And mostly these were all sorts of bespectacled intellectuals from the cities, locksmiths from factories, fierce villagers, enthusiasts, volunteers. They were brought in, unloaded from trucks, and usually within an hour on this patch, all the reinforcements became a collection of full-fledged corpses. Within a day, the bodies would freeze to the state of the hardest types of wood, and they were used to build defensive structures for those who were still alive. And it was all absolutely in vain. There was no military sense. Stalin simply pointed his finger and said, it wouldn't be bad to hold on to this. And there were dozens, if not hundreds, of such operations where people were senselessly and aimlessly sacrificed. Sometimes 500,000 people, sometimes a bit less, Well, remember the miracle operation or the so-called Narva landing of Admiral Tributes. Remember Zhukov's nickname, the Butcher. And now, knowing the habits of Russian generals like Surovikin and seeing in reality how Russia conducts war with meat assaults, you will understand the validity of these nicknames and the origin of their hellish losses. Of course, any statements by Trump are still, well, yes, they are very eagerly picked up by the world, but still no one will be able to indulge in the joys of victory frenzy within Russia itself, but only for self-gratification. And there are plenty of ways to wipe away any tears of resentment, because enough flags have been sown and stamped in various forms. And in general, the propaganda machine does not know how to respond to this sudden, bold, sharp, and of course, deadly stunt by Trump. Whether he intended it to be particularly toxic or if it just happened that way is unclear.